Central Texas. July 1944. The afternoon sun has a certain thickness to it, the kind that blurs the line between breath and dust. Heat drapes across the fields like a curtain. A gravel road shivers with the arrival of a military truck, its wooden sideboards rattling, its tires coughing up pale clouds. The truck groans to a stop beside a canvas mess tent. For a moment, everything stills except the echoing insects, shrill, steady, relentless. Inside the truck bed, 12 men in sun-bleached German uniforms sit pressed together, each motion reduced to the smallest necessity. Their boots bear the stains of travel, their faces, the expressions of men uncertain whether they have reached safety or another kind of front line. They smell of leather, sweat, and the long vibration of trains. The guard's voice snaps them back to life. "All right, off you go." They climb down one by one, cringing from the hammer of sunlight. This part of Texas feels endless flat world, sky like a lid, earth breathing heat. Somewhere, from the direction of the camp kitchen, comes an unfamiliar fragrance. Yeast, milk, and something almost frivolously sweet. It is the first smell in months that does not mean fear or fire. One of the men, Schneider, is young enough that war still sits clumsily on him. He pauses mid-stride, drawn by that scent. For a moment, he imagines Lübeck at dawn, his father pulling rye loaves from the bakery oven, crusts singed dark, steam like incense rising into street fog. His chest tightens as memory dissolves into sun glare. They are marched toward the tent. An American sergeant waits, arms folded, the authority of routine softening his posture. "You'll get chow before detail," he says, and his English, though half lost on them, carries no spite. The prisoners hesitate. Food first, it feels like a trick. The world they came from rewarded suspicion as wisdom. Inside the tent, the air bends under heat. A woman from the nearby town, her hair tied in a red scarf, works at a table dusted in flour. She lifts out a loaf the color of old paper. The smell thickens, warm as comfort. Schneider stares openly. The loaf is pale, almost indecently clean. No rugged crust, no stubborn body of rye. When she slices it, the knife glides without resistance. Each piece folds softly, like a pillow under its own weight. Bread, he thinks, should fight back when cut. It should resist. This melts. Plates appear. The men are served one slice each, with a smear of butter and a streak of golden syrup that catches the light like varnish. Schneider takes a bite. It yields instantly. Too soft, too sweet, so weightless that his tongue feels tricked. It tastes of nothing that endured hunger or siege. For several seconds he cannot decide whether to be grateful or offended. An older prisoner murmurs, "Luftbrot," air bread. The others snicker low in their throats, finding in the absurdity a kind of safety. The guards grin, half amused at their own generosity being doubted. Somebody quips, "America feeds the clouds," and even the sergeant lets a brief smile break his discipline. For the first time since capture, laughter moves through the group, awkward, human, unplanned. Schneider chews again, slower this time. The flavor no longer seems empty, but simply different. He realizes the bread's whiteness, its impossible softness, belongs to another world's logic. A world where flour never runs out, where ovens burn steady, where airplanes drop bombs halfway across the ocean, yet kitchens remain peaceful and bright. It tastes like the opposite of war. Around them, the landscape hums on. Grass rustling, distant rails trembling, America breathing in broad, unhurried strokes. The prisoners finish their slices in silence, uncertain whether they have been fed or humbled. When they finally rise, crumbs cling to their palms, faint and ghostly. The sergeant points to the truck again. "Back up, fellas," he orders, but his tone sounds almost gentle. The men climb aboard, pockets still warm with what they have tasted. Beneath the rattle of wheels starting again, Schneider presses his thumb into a remaining bit of crust, studying the spring of it, the strange perfection. The war may continue elsewhere, but inside that fragile instant dust, light, bread, the boundaries bend. They expected cruelty. They received a lesson in abundance. The question rests in every mind as the truck disappears down the sunlit road. Was this real bread or a dream of peace disguised as food? The heat begins to fade. Evening draws its long shadows across the prairie, and the camp's daily rhythm waits ahead. Roll call, labor, English words to decode, unfamiliar customs to absorb. The soft loaf lingers as the first mystery of a new captivity. From here, the story widens beyond the tent, beyond the first bewildered bite, to the strange community that will form in this unlikely place. Morning in Central Texas begins not with birdsong, but with screens of glare light spilling over wire, tin roofs shining like mirrors. The heat builds early. Inside the camp, the bugle call draws the prisoners from their bunks, men still caught halfway between war and dream. Canvas walls ripple faintly in the desert breeze. Boots scuff the dust in a rhythm that is already becoming habit. The compound lies outside the small town of Hearn. Its geometry is plain: long wooden barracks, towers at corners, a mess tent large enough to smell from every point inside the wire. From afar, it might resemble a farming cooperative more than a prison. Wheat fields surround it. Freight trains thunder past on their way to the Gulf, hauling the same grain that will return later as loaves so white they seem bleached by victory. Life within the wire operates by the numbers. Roll call at 6. Coffee, or what the prisoners call brown water. Then work assignments, road repair, lumber hauling, field clearing. Americans guard them loosely, rifles slung low, hands relaxed. The guards are farm boys themselves, some barely 20, more interested in the evening baseball game than vengeance. They speak to the prisoners with the steady manners of men taught polite distance. Schneider learns the pattern quickly. He falls in with a detail repairing barn roofs on nearby farms, rides each morning past the water tower, whose sides boast home of the fighting eagles, and returns each evening to the same boiled beans and factory bread. He starts marking the days by taste the sharp onions on Mondays, the molasses drizzle on Sundays, the endless presence of that soft, white loaf. The bread becomes a symbol none of them can ignore. To the Americans, it is simply standard issue, the post-depression miracle of industrial food. To the Germans, shaped by scarcity, it feels uncanny bread that arrives by machine, untouched by hands, uniform as soldiers on parade. During rest hours, they tease one another about its ghostly color. "America eats paper," one jokes. Another replies, "Yes, but at least their paper is warm." Their laughter hides confusion. Abundance is difficult to forgive. For men raised on rations, to be fed without struggle is almost shameful, as though one's hunger had been the last proof of meaning. Outside the fence, ordinary Texas life carries on. Trucks loaded with bales grind down the road, radios play swing tunes in kitchens, and townspeople drive leisurely past the camp to glimpse the Nazis. Curiosity mixes with Christian conscience. Some locals leave folded newspapers by the gate. Others attend services, praying for a quick end to the fighting and for their sons abroad. At dusk, the smell from the mess hall drifts beyond the wire rich with butter and plentiful flour. Young guards lean against fence posts, smoking Lucky Strikes, while prisoners gather in small knots under the glow of naked bulbs. They trade stories. A bakery in Hamburg reduced to rubble. A mother carving stale rye into thin survival cards. A sister lost somewhere between trains. Schneider listens, his mind sliding back to that first loaf handed to him in the tent. It had no childhood memory attached to it, no hand kneading, no burn marks from a home oven. And yet the sweetness, the soft compression of it, haunted him. It represented something absurd, impossible, a world so sheltered that even its bread never learned hardship. He writes a letter to his family through the Red Cross forms provided. They feed us well, he writes, and the bread is white like linen. Perhaps this whiteness is what peace looks like. He hesitates, knowing the censor will read each line, and smiles faintly at the thought peace expressed as texture. The prisoner camp becomes a miniature society. Within its wire gardens sprout. Vegetables grow in tidy patches tended by German hands. Camp officers encourage these gestures of utility. They organize a choir, teach English lessons, even stage a play, one Sunday Faust, rewritten to end happily. It is easier to survive when the imagination is allowed a small rehearsal of freedom. Americans observe this curiosity with respect tinged by disbelief. The guards never forget these men were once their enemies, but proximity humanizes without permission. When a prisoner cuts his hand on barbed wire, a corporal fetches the medic before finishing his cigarette. The natural order of hostility begins to crumble, replaced by the slower rhythm of sympathy. Through that rhythm, culture seeps across in both directions. Germans learn how to drawl howdy, convincing enough to make the guards laugh. The guards pick up fragments of guttural thanks. One afternoon, a shared harmonica tune bridges their accents in melody instead of grammar. Music, like bread, refuses to recognize fences. By autumn, the contradictions feel ordinary. Texas skies blaze cobalt over heads once bent to the gray air of Europe. The cotton harvest piles up along the highway like drifting snow. The camp's kitchen keeps up with it all, ovens glowing night and day. Every morning, Schneider wakes to the same perfume of yeast and mild sweetness, and every morning it still unsettles him. He begins volunteering for kitchen duty, partly to understand it, partly because the ovens remind him of home. The smell of dough rising, though made from enemy wheat and foreign machines, remains a familiar language. He studies the American process. No wood smoke, no sour starter, everything measured, quick, efficient. Bread designed not for flavor, but for uniform satisfaction. The discovery troubles and fascinates him in equal measure. It seems that here, comfort has replaced faith in mechanism, faith in control, faith that every slice should feel identical so that no one, ever again, must wonder where the next meal comes from. Yet in this mechanical miracle lies the seed of understanding. Inside the wire, men learn that dignity can exist even in captivity. Outside, their guards learn that mercy does not weaken discipline. Both sides absorb this odd lesson day by day, breath by breath, mouthful by mouthful. By the time winter approaches, the camp hums like a well-kept engine, predictable, yet quietly transformative. The aroma of baking serves as background music to an education neither army had planned. And within this steady heartbeat of labor and smell, one question begins to rise more urgently inside Schneider's thoughts. If comfort can dwell beside captivity, what truths lie hidden inside the next loaf he will make? From here, the story narrows again to fingers shaping dough, to sweat on forearms near hot ovens, to the contradictions that turn nourishment into conscience. Morning of December, 1944. Frost outlines every nailhead along the barracks walls. Each breath hangs a moment before vanishing into thin, metallic air. At this latitude, winter is subtle, no snow, only pale haze, but for men who have spent months encircled by sun, this chill feels almost European. The bakery's smoke plume drifts vertical, straight as a mast. Schneider walks through the gate with the day's kitchen detail, boots whispering over frozen clay, heart numbed by monotony. Inside, the ovens roar like captured thunder. The Americans who supervise wave him over without ceremony. He has worked here for weeks now, trusted, quiet, meticulous. His fingers have begun to remember precision, the elegant rhythm of kneading. The dough under his palms is soft as breath, too soft for the rough gestures of soldiering. He presses, folds, presses again, the way his father used to. Expectation. Imprisonment stripped of skill and pride. Reversal. Confinement restoring an old identity. The flour sacks tower to the ceiling, U.S. flour enriched, each label a boast of affluence. Schneider's eye lingers on the word enriched, a victory word, confident and casual. He wonders how anything enriched could come from war. He shapes the loaves the American way, meticulous weighing, exact cuts, pans lined in regimented rows. The smell clings to him, halfway between childhood and surrender. The guard named Miller, freckled and good-natured, often hums country tunes while stacking racks. One morning, Miller drops an oven tray and curses mildly. Schneider instinctively crouches to help. Both reach for the same handle, then laugh, the laughter awkward yet astonishingly normal. Each day, irony thickens. Every loaf they bake feeds both prisoner and captor. Food without prejudice, warmth shared by men who only months earlier had sought to extinguish one another's nations. Schneider begins to see that hunger itself enforces a truce the war could not. Rumors reach them of heavy fighting in Ardennes. The guards call it the bulge. To Schneider, it resembles another distant wound he cannot stop feeling. That night, under the weak light bulb strung from the roof beam, the prisoners read fragments from outdated newspapers. Names of cities blur into ash. He cannot tell if his home still exists. Yet tomorrow he will rise and coax yeast to life with measured care. The contrast feels obscene and holy at once. By February 1945, he oversees half the baking routine. The sergeant jokes that the Kraut Bakery beats the Army's own. Schneider accepts the compliment with a nod, but the praise burns. It means he is valued precisely for perfecting his captor's comfort. In private, he writes again to his mother, "I make bread every day, but it no longer belongs to anyone. It just exists, like forgiveness." The letter never leaves the camp. Paper shortages delay everything, but the act of writing changes him. He begins experimenting after hours, mixing in bits of coarser grain from the camp garden, trying to mimic German rye. When the loaves emerge darker, heavier, several Americans wrinkle their noses, preferring their soft perfection. Schneider smiles. For the first time in months, he feels the texture of home, rough but honest. That evening, he breaks one of those heavy loaves among his bunkmates. The crust crackles. They eat in silence, reverent, as though tasting their own stubbornness. Across the room, someone whispers, "Maybe freedom will be unenriched bread." Meanwhile, outside the wire, the town fair opens on the courthouse lawn. The logistics officer from the camp, proud of his efficient bakery, submits a gleaming loaf for the food exhibit without mentioning its authors. When the blue ribbon is pinned beside it, gossip stirs. "Those were enemy hands in that dough," says one woman. Another answers quietly, "Maybe that's why it rose so well. They prayed harder." No one knows which comment carries the deeper truth. Within days, even local papers mention the story, cloaked in irony. German dough earns Texas praise. Some urge the army to shut the bakery contest down. Instead, it becomes an unofficial legend. Schneider hears of it from a chuckling sergeant. He laughs in return, a small sound of disbelief. Recognition wrapped in displacement. A strange sort of victory. Spring returns, green creeping along the fence line. The camp expands a garden plot. Prisoners and guards work side by side, planting corn, squash, even a few stalks of rye. The earth beneath their fingers is neutral ground, no nationality in the soil. Under such work, silence feels companionable instead of hostile. On Good Friday, the camp chaplain arranges an ecumenical service under the open tarpaulin of the mess yard. Hymns echo through the frame structures, one language blending into another until words lose meaning. The bread served for communion is the camp's ordinary white loaf. Everyone partakes, shared crumbs glinting like dust on their sleeves. No one speaks, but tears trace quiet paths down more than one face. Later, as twilight spills violet through the wire, Schneider strolls the perimeter. On the outside path, a small girl, maybe 7, hair in ribbons, waits with her father, one of the sentries. In her hands, she holds a crust bundled in wax paper. She reaches through the lower strands of wire to offer it. He hesitates, then kneels and accepts. The crust is still warm. When he looks up, she smiles shyly, as though exchanging secrets instead of gifts. He returns the gesture with a bow of the head that feels ancient. That night, he cannot sleep. He stares at the piece of bread beside his cot, the faint impression of a child's small fingers still visible in the soft. It seems a relic, absurdly holy, proof that innocence has survived somewhere in this vast machinery of war. He eats it slowly, with the same care he once gave to prayer. The following days move in gentle repetition. The ovens roar, the flour dust settles, the smell of dough swells and recedes. The boundary between labor and forgiveness blurs until they are indistinguishable. Schneider watches Miller slice the flawless loaves with an easy smile and thinks, perhaps this is what it means to serve life rather than nation. The war outside continues its long collapse. The one inside between pride and humility quietly resolves itself loaf by loaf. And so, when the surrender finally comes, the men in Hearn's camp do not cheer. They simply go on baking, because routine has taught them the purest form of resistance, to create instead of destroy. From here, we move toward the slow unwinding, toward the farewells, the simple gifts, and the faint taste of reconciliation that lingers after the ovens cool. May 1945. Morning again in Texas, bright, sharp, alive with the sound of tractors beginning their day. The war, they say, is over. But the word reaches Hearn like an echo crossing the ocean, muffled, unbelieved, too enormous to fit inside the camp's daily simplicity. Men who have lived by count and whistle now look toward the distant horizon as if expecting the sky itself to change color. The guards move differently, looser somehow. The tension that once sharpened every gesture now softened into routine. They talk about discharge, about driving home, about gasoline and girls and the future. The prisoners listen, measuring those words as if they were ingredients in a recipe they no longer possess. Schneider hears it from Miller while cleaning the ovens. "It's done," the American says quietly. "Hitler's gone." The statement leaves no place for reply. Schneider simply nods, brushing a hand across his forehead. The ashes on his palms leave gray streaks too familiar to be mistaken for flour. All day the camp hums with a strange stillness the soundless presence of relief and loss tangled together. No siren, no horn marks the moment. Only the smell of bread again fills the air, as it has every day of their captivity, stubborn proof that life insists on repetition. That night, Schneider returns to the bakery alone. The ovens have cooled. The racks rest empty. He opens the back door to the dark fields and breathes the scent of rye from the garden, almost ripe now, the plant's thin blades shimmering under starlight. A thought comes, sudden and quiet. Before they leave, he will bake one final loaf, his own recipe, not the army's. He sets to work before dawn. It takes hours to grind the coarse grain with borrowed tools, to knead the dough slowly, patiently, until the texture turns dense and true. He adds only a little sugar, just enough to remind the tongue that kindness need not always be sweet. By sunrise, the loaf is ready. He slides it into the oven and waits, the glow across his face like a sunrise captured in brick. When it cools, he wraps it in brown paper and waits by the gate. The truck that will take them north to the processing center stands idling, dust curling around its tires. Miller approaches, adjusting his cap, eyes uncertain. "You baking up till the last minute, huh?" he says. Schneider extends the package. "For you," he answers in careful English. "Real bread." Miller weighs it in his hands, warm, substantial, unexpected. He studies Schneider for a long second, then tears the loaf in half and hands one piece back. "Guess we'll both find out what real means," he says, and they eat together, standing beside the fence. The taste is earthy, almost bitter, alive with the memory of hands, of firewood, of patience. Steam curls from the fractured crust. For a moment, neither man moves. The air smells of wheat and smoke, and an ending that is also a beginning. In that silence, all the miles between their continents seem to collapse. When the convoy pulls away, the camp looks unchanged. Barbed wire, towers, the same sun beating down. Yet something invisible has shifted. The men staring out from the truck no longer see themselves through the eyes of enemies. Behind them, the bakery door hangs open, letting the smell wander into the surrounding fields. Within days, the ovens will cool for good. Within months, the buildings will stand empty, slowly weathering back into the landscape. Years roll forward. Quietly. The world rebuilds, forgetting in its noisy triumph the fragile peace learned behind fences. Yet the memory survives in private ways and recipes, in greetings exchanged by former guards and prisoners who write across oceans, in the modest miracle of bread baked not to feed victory, but to prove that survival can still be gentle. In 1953, Schneider opens a small bakery in Hamburg. On its front window, he paints a single English word learned in Texas: home. His loaves are neither white nor black, but gold-brown, thick-scented, balanced between bitterness and grace. When customers ask for softer bread, he smiles and shakes his head. "Soft," he tells them softly, "belongs to peace." We had to earn it first. Across the Atlantic, Miller runs a family diner in Temple, Texas. Once a year, he bakes a darker rustic loaf he calls the German. His grandchildren are puzzled by its density, by the ritual gravity with which he slices it. He tells them, "That loaf reminds me bread can end a war in small ways." They nod, not yet understanding, but they will remember. Time smooths everything except scent: flour, heat, yeast. The same notes linger wherever humans crave comfort. On quiet nights, the smell alone can recall summers long past, dust and sweat and mercy shared through fences. In the ruins of great events, history often forgets the gestures too simple to record. One soldier breaking bread with another, one child's hand offering a crust through wire. Yet these are the crumbs by which civilization finds its path back to itself. Wind moves over the old campground, through tall grasses rustling like faraway applause. The bakery foundation remains, pale under the Texas sun, a frame for the memory of rising dough and rising hope. The air tastes faintly of wheat whenever it rains. Between them, though they never saw each other again, two bakers, one German, one American, went on feeding their neighbors. The war receded. The bread endured. In the smallest acts of feeding, enemies rediscovered their own humanity. And somewhere between hunger and mercy, real bread finally began.